welcome to our first podcast. We are hoping to inspire and encourage others, providing some resources and some things that we've discovered over the last few weeks. My name is Jeff Buum, along with
Dykstra.
And I'd love to give you a title, but we have not come up with one yet. So maybe the listeners will be able to provide us with that at some point, Jen. But ultimately, our goal here is to basically help people grow and develop in either their spirituality, just their mindset, and all these types of things. And there isn't a better co-host on the planet to have for something like this other than Jen Dykstra. I'm the meat of it, and she's the potatoes. Way to kick this off, right?
Broccoli and salad.
There we go.
You know why? Because it's like a salad is like all the things. It can be a cucumber, it can be like fruit, it can be all the things. So I'm more of a salad than a potato girl because the potato is pretty like one-sided.
A little starchy.
And a little starchy.
Yeah,
where
starchy.
I am totally a salad. Like, give me the biggest, best salad, and I am all in on the salad.
All right. Well, she's the salad girl. So we'll remember that throughout the go. So, Jen, you and I came up with this idea, probably 6 weeks ago or whatever. We've had some interesting conversations, and we don't do them frequently enough. And when we sit down, I always come away with something. Most of the time, it's not one, it's several. And I ponder on these things for weeks. And I think what really sparked this whole thing was we had a really nice conversation for probably an hour and a half, 2 hours in a coffee shop. And Jen brought this book called The Threshold, and we'll talk about that today, but brought this beautiful book called The Threshold. And it kind of one of those things where it hits you and you can't stop thinking about it almost on a daily basis. And so now every time I pick up that book, I think of Jen. So the next time that we got together, I'm like, oh my God, this book. And we started talking about things, and it just kind of were like, you know what? We should share some of these things that we talk about. There's so many people out there that want to grow, want to get better in so many aspects of their life. And you are one that you just come up with all these beautiful resources and all these things. And so this is really what we're here for, is to kind of share on the things. So with that in mind, I mean, we've had a whole month or six weeks or so to kind of prepare for this. And so lots of reading and lots of listening probably have happened. So like what's kind of hit you in the last month and a half?
Oh gosh, you have no idea. So many things. Like, the beauty of like Jeff and I getting together is that we never know where the conversation's going to go. So if it feels a little bit disjointed or whatever, it's literally just us like being prompted by each other's conversation, the different things that we've gone through, how we've grown over the years, maybe what's holding us back, what are the things that are really going well, and encouraging each other through those things. I think that that's really where it came down to play, right? Like the joke is that 9 times out of 10, I will have this like epiphany that I just need to reach out to like 10 or 15 or 20 people. And then all of a sudden I just won't respond because Jeff goes, hey, let's get together. And like, that's a great idea, but I can't fit you in yet. So then it's like radio silence. Anybody else feel like that?
Yeah, so it's not a pet peeve of mine. It's a pet peeve of probably 95% of the world. If you send somebody a text, you would expect, and other people do this to me too, which a little bit drives me crazy, but normally it's within maybe 12, sometimes 24 hours, but typically within the same day. You can send a text to Jen, and then like 4 days later, she picked up the conversation like we were just having it. So there's times you'll have to go back in the text and go, what was it now? Where were we at? So with that being said.
But that just shows that we are such good friends that we also understand that life is busy, things happen, and you've learned a little bit about me, and that if I can't say yes, if I'm kind of saying no, I probably am just going to let it go by the wayside for a minute until I can say yes. So there are people in the world that are like that, me included. You're not. You're like, let's get it on the agenda, even if it's 4 weeks out, even if it's 2 weeks out, right? Like, so it's, I think we're also getting to know each other more, and we're also understanding like what goes on in the world. And sometimes what we think we need is not necessarily what we need.
Right. And there's times where I have to understand the other person's not the weirdo, it's me. And it's okay. I just heard there was a podcast I wrote this down. Her name was Ellen Langer.
Ooh,
So Huberman Lab.
I do like who
I do
Huberman
love
Lab.
And the thing that sucks about his podcast, they're like 4 hours.
Yes.
And if you get sucked into one, you're like, well, now this is my whole day.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to break this up into how many chunks. And so he was talking with this Ellen Langer. And she was talking about, there were so many great things in there, but like, who's the weirdo on the thing? Like, what's the problem? Is this an inconvenience or is this a tragedy? And so part of it, I'm like, you know what? It's just a slight inconvenience that someone's not responding right back to me. It's not that big of a deal. And so I just kind of go, you know what? Let's let it go. They're going to respond when they respond.
Yeah.
And like you said, you're going to learn like, okay, Jen's you got some people that are close talkers.
Right.
You got some people that are soft talkers.
Mm-hmm.
You got some people that are slow texters. Those people in my life, I just let them go slow text.
Oh, brilliant. Well, I think I sent you that. Did I send you that podcast?
No, you sent this is
different
one
one
too. I wanted to talk. The Josh Whiteskin, the chess player.
Yes.
Now,
oh, goodness.
You loved it. I thought the podcast itself was slow and methodical and sucked, but the guy himself, fascinating.
Totally fascinating. So the reason that I loved it, it wasn't the fact. Well, one, I know nothing about chess. And so one, it was fascinating that somebody would devote their life to being like the best chess player in the world. And I was like, holy crap, like that's crazy to me. Right. But I also loved that in that podcast, he talked about how he was like in a neighborhood. It was the old guys as a youth that brought him in and raised him up, right? So for me, it was more about like the relationships and his continued pursuit of whatever it was that came up. And like that's one of the themes that I think has come up lately for me is just like what is the pursuit? What is the why? Which I think we always hear about the why. And I seriously always struggle with the why. Like, why do I do this? Why do I? I'm like, just because I do. And so sometimes I get caught up in that. But lately that has come up a ton. Like, what is your why? What is it that drives you to be better? What is it that drives you to want to show up for work every day, show up for your workout every day, eat right, whatever it is? There is an underlying theme of why people go and pursue hard things.
Yeah.
I haven't figured out mine yet. Have you?
No, not necessarily. Think about that guy. He's like a freak.
Yeah.
Like to go in and say, I am like not just an elite, one of the best in the entire world, if not the best, at like 16. Yeah. And then goes, well, I kind of kicked everyone's ass in this thing. Maybe one guy beats me an adult who's been doing this with about 10 to 15 more years of experience. He beats me. You know what? I'm kind of done with that. I'm going to quit playing chess, which has been a massive part of my life since it's my childhood. And now I'm just going to go take up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I'm going to go win the world in that now. Right. So I'll be the best in that in the world. Right. So it's like, how do you take something that's super complicated, like what you said, the chess? No idea how to play it. And if you ask me what the pawn pieces are, I can't even. There's a king.
I don't know.
I think there's
queen.
A king.
There's always
a
queen.
King and there's queen. And there's other parts, and I don't know what they are. He figures that out, becomes the best, and then takes another thing that people will strive for decades to become a black belt or whatever. And he's like, well, I'm going to go in there and then I'm going to go beat everybody up in the world with this specialized skill. And you're like, that part of it I thought was fascinating. The story, as the podcast flowed, I was like, okay, this guy is super interesting. I didn't even hear the whole thing. Once I learned the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu thing, I just started to bow and go, okay, you're on another level of anyone I've ever seen. It's like if Michael Jordan would have went over to baseball and been the best that we've ever seen, it would be the equivalent. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's so odd.
But what does it really mean to be the best?
Well, you win the world championships. It kind of.
I know, but like if you're the best, then you're like the only one. Right. Right. Like this has come up. I forget. I listen to way too much stuff, but I think that it came up as well. Like, what does it mean to be the best? And like, if somebody told you you are the best at eating hot dogs, I don't know what it is, right? But like, if you were the best at that, like once you've now won a championship, what's next? Right? Like, how many times do we think that like, here's the goal. This is also something I talked to the coach about last week, is like, I don't celebrate the little wins,
Right.
because I get the goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, okay, let's go. Like, what's the next thing?
Right.
But I think we forget in general to celebrate the little wins. And I think it is that pursuit of the best. Like, the reason that he had to go and be like the best at this, and then like, okay, I've achieved that. Now what? That's no longer fulfilling.
Right.
But we also forget to celebrate in that space. And if you don't celebrate and we're always pursuing, we're going to be drained.
Right.
Drained.
It is the human experience, though. Hey, I just hit my goal. It didn't fulfill me the way that I thought. I put all the work and effort into it, and then I got there, and I thought my life would be so much different.
Yeah.
And it's really not. And so, okay, well, I'm going to go on to the next thing. I think that's like the book, The Gap and the Gain, talks about this a lot. It's like it's the journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we think is the ideal out ahead of us. It could be, 5 months, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. But we start looking down there and we're like, what is the ideal? Okay, this is the house I live in, this is where it is, whether you're married or you don't have, whatever, your situation is, but you create this ideal and then you're pursuing it. And the problem with it is that ideal changes all the time.
Right.
And so,
but yeah, we don't actually let it change.
Right. So
let's just be honest,
it's
right?
buried in our brain.
Yeah.
But even if you were like at 30 versus 40, going to 50, like what your ideal was at 30, you've probably already been there and exceeded it. And so like that ideal isn't there. It's really, what's the progress that I'm making? So we keep putting the goalposts further and further away. And then we're like, why don't we celebrate it? Because we just already moved it.
I know.
So like for me, I ran quite a few half marathons, and every time the pursuit of finishing it, always in my mind, I'm like, this one's going to be different. This one's going to make me feel this way. And in the moment when you finish it, it doesn't feel like that at all. It's probably, for me, I don't even really recognize the celebration until quite some time later. Now I celebrate the one that's probably the most memorable is in the Badlands of North Dakota, Marahe Trail. Very challenging. Got done with it. Now, so this is probably 5-6 years ago, and now I celebrate it more than I ever did for the first, the day or two after.
So what made it make you celebrate it today versus then?
Realizing that's challenge. I think it's part of it is just the memories, and then also like the remembering like what I did differently to train for that one. Like normally it was like, hey, I'm going to throw in music and I'm just going to go and I'm going to go grind out miles.
Yeah.
This time I went, I'm going to put on things that help me grow mentally. And so those miles would go by faster. And then also knowing there's going to be a lot of different elevation and those types of things, just a different training. But the accomplishment, but it's like standing on top of a butte or a plateau or whatever you call these things in the Badlands, standing on top of it and then looking around in the middle of that race.
And you're like this big in comparison to those. Is it that emotion that you felt?
Yeah. And I don't think when you get done, you're like, okay, well, I finished it. That was pretty cool. Even I don't remember what it might even be on my Facebook page yet. I think that's still my image. I changed it a few years ago. Now it's like, hey, that was a really cool race. I did it. Yeah. And now you kind of want to go back, and I'm like, no, don't go back and do it again.
Because what if it's not the same?
Don't go back and do it, and then you'll get hurt, and then it's a bad thing. So I think part of it is we're just mentally wired to not really even understand what we've accomplished, because we've moved the goalposts by the time we even get there. Yeah. When I'm done with this, then I'm going to go do that.
Right.
Because
it's like this is a stopping spot, right? But like, I mean, I totally agree. This is a stopping spot, but you can't. Like it's a yielding spot, right? You can't ever just like stay in that place, move forward with like, you have to stop. But I think it goes back to when I asked you about the emotion, right? Like if you think back to any of those other races, were you getting rid of emotion? Were you just doing it to do it? Like, I think that's the difference that I see for me. Right. But I think if you're just doing it to do it, then that's fine. Like sometimes we just have to do it to do it. right? Like sometimes that is the seasons that we're in. We're just like trudging. We just do all the things. We get all the stuff done on our list. We just keep going.
And so what you just said. So if I looked at it and really went like, I will admit, and I've told other people, I'm like, there's times I do things just to be vain.
Yeah.
And like, there's,
We're human.
yeah, you want to do
Yeah.
weight loss, you want to do things, you want to look good. There's other parts of it, but there's always some vanity in anything that you do when it comes to appearance. And so when a lot of the running, I think, started because it started with triathlon, and I lost significant amount of weight. Quit doing a lot of my bad habits that I had on a regular too. And so that started to flip. And then I'm like, well, what if I ran a half marathon? And then the weight would start to yo-yo. And then I'm like, okay, well, if I went and did that, the weight come back down. But this will probably go back to what we just talked about. Every time I would finish one and do a certain amount of training, it didn't fulfill the ideal of how I thought I was going to look. So all of a sudden people are like, oh, you went out and ran 500 miles, in the first 6 months of the year. Everyone thinks you're just shredded.
Yeah.
You got a six pack and you're like, nope, your hips hurt, beat to shit, you're inflamed. Nothing really fits, everything's weird.
And you're puffy.
Yeah, you don't look like you think that you would. You watch TV and you see someone, a marathon runner, and you think, well, I'm gonna look like that. You don't. I'm still 230 pounds and I'm kind of, loping around out there. And so and I think that's part of it. The celebration wasn't necessarily finishing the race because I'd done enough of them. And I think I completed 10. It wasn't necessarily completing it. It was really like, what did I think that I was going to look like?
Right.
And then how was that going to make me feel? Right. And when it was disappointing, I actually felt disappointed. So there wasn't anything to celebrate. Now, when I look back on it, I'm like, those were stepping stones for me to do the next and the next and the next. And all the growth that probably happened inside of that, those training runs and all those types of things is really what put me where I'm at today, competing with myself.
Right.
And I think that's some of that too. Like when we talked about the chess player and the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with Josh Weitzkin, he's competing with himself.
Right.
But he's competing against others. So you're like, how do you know when you're the best? It's when you beat everybody that says they're the best.
Right. Yeah.
You are then. And he obviously was completely unfulfilled.
Yeah.
After he had done it. And it's like, now what's the next thing? So.
Right. Well, I'm actually reading Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. It's a really old book, but that same theme is coming up over and over and over again in my life. Like, what is it that we have to overcome? Right? It's the idea. And I think to the heart of each one of us, we all have something we want to overcome. And sometimes we don't know what it is.
Right.
Like, I love that in the book, David Goggins says that we are only ever operating at 40% of our capacity. And I'm like, what? Like, I feel like I'm spent on every side, right? Like getting up early, and like we talked about it. We both have like really long morning routines, right? But then I'm reading like what his morning routine is. And he gets up and does like 26 miles and he rides to work. Like, I'm like, this is how people find time to do these things. Like, have you ever had that thought, like before you started, training, before you started doing your normal morning routine, have you ever thought like, gosh, how do people get stuff done?
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, right.
And it becomes hard to understand on that because I don't have enough time. And you're like, really? Let's compare schedules. And you're like, you definitely have time. Let's do some minor adjustments.
Yeah.
Let's do some simple exchanges in our time. I love that. I always love the simple exchange. It's a simple exchange of time. How much time do you spend on social media? How much time do you watch TV? How much time are you doing something that really isn't moving the ball forward, but you still go back and say, I really like to lose some weight.
Yeah.
But you're not taking that simple exchange. And like Goggins, he runs, I think today it's like he runs 7 miles every single morning because I don't think he's training for anything. And his body's probably a little bit down.
Right.
And I think he's still the pull-up record holder.
I think so too.
Someone may have beat him, but like really, he's such an extreme.
Yeah.
But 7 miles every morning, and he's like, I want to do something that sucks. I hate running. I'm like, well, why wouldn't you? You're an ultra marathoner.
Right.
Of course you hate running.
Yeah.
So it's almost like he wants to go through the pain and suffering So like, he's got a weird like psyche about the whole thing, but he accomplishes a lot.
But I also think that, yes, it's the pain and suffering, but I also think, don't we hear the word pain and we automatically think of like an injury that we've had. We
Mhm.
think of a heartache that we've gone through. We think of something really hard, but like, what do they say? Like, on the other side of pain is our breakthrough,
Right.
right? And so, and I also think like the same kind of thing, like spiritual warfare is like a couple of podcasts I listened to lately about spiritual warfare. And it's like we are bombarded with pain of any sort, whether it be physical, mental, emotional, whatever, before something new comes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like the hard part is like when we are sitting in that spiritual warfare, it is miserable. And but that's when we have to learn how to go back and celebrate the wins,
Right.
so that we can be like, okay, well, I've overcome this once. I can overcome it again. Like it's those little things that like, and it's those emotions that bring us back to that,
Right.
and propel us during the crappy times in life when like we all like, it's not if it's going to happen, it's just when, right? Like, unfortunately, we all have seasons of struggle. We all have seasons of being pulled in every single direction and trying to figure out what that means. But I do think like we have to go back and remember, but we just can't stay there. It's like the yielding process. So I do think that all of those little things that happen to us in life build us up for the times that we're going to go over into something new, into something greater, into something more fulfilling.
Yeah.
Or into maybe it's not even more fulfilling. Maybe it's just like next fulfilling. Right. Like whatever is coming next.
And Goggins, some of his upbringing was like
horrific.
So, you know, there's some mental things that he had to get through with it. But you know, and the one what he talks to, there was a video that I have to mention first because it ties in. But he was out running one day and it's raining, and there someone's in a vehicle and they got the video camera on him because he's making his videos, and he goes, you know, I'm out here, I'm running, and it's raining, and you know, a lot of people would say, I'm not going out here. He said, someone says, you know, hey, you know, why are you out here running in the rain? Because you're not. So, so he's got this competitive where like everybody around him, like, I want to be elevated, I want to be different, and he accomplishes that. And you know, speaking of the pain, too, is I think that whatever it is, whether it's exercise or let's even say diet or your job, whatever it is, we start to look at something, and if it looks challenging and a potential failure, it creates kind of that pain or fear response. And so like, you know, even though people say you work out all the time, people have this vision of you're just in there sweating your tail off and sweat's pouring off me and I'm just exhausted every morning. And I'm like, it ain't anything like that. No. I don't put myself through torture. I want to come back the next day.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, you know, I don't make it so uncomfortable for myself that I dread it. I actually look forward to it because it is a growth thing, and it's not about beating the crap out of yourself.
But that's where you can also see, right? Like I've started to just I've done more lifting lately.
Yeah.
And just doing like weights and things like that, especially as I get older as a woman. And the importance of lifting weights and how we lose that muscle. And one of the things, it's so stupid, but like, and I know we all do it, so I'm just gonna say it, but you know, it's once you start to lift, and I love shoulders, so I'm so very, but like I love shoulders, so I love lifting shoulders as much as I can. And so it's super rewarding when you stand in front of the mirror and you'll be like, look at that, like that's a muscle, right? And so sometimes I think that the pursuit of something doesn't have it, you have to stretch yourself. But if instead of, it's kind of like that swap or that's, what did you call
Simple
it?
exchange.
Yes, simple exchange. So many terminologies. But like, I think that when you think about it, like, what is it that you want? Like, as opposed to it being like, how am I going to feel? But you also have to know, like, what is it that I need to see? Because I do think like we have all of our senses and we have to use all of our senses to really know what our ideal is, to really know like that we've got there, right? And it can literally be as simple as like flexing your muscle in a mirror and being like, boom, I got that.
That's a celebration.
100% celebration.
And you know, even when you look at like someone's like how we look at food.
Yeah.
The concern is I'm going to not eat this, which is my normal diet, and I'm going to do a simple exchange for that. Instantly, what if I'm hungry 2 hours from now?
Yeah.
You're going to die.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. You probably die of starvation. Someone will have to,
Yeah.
pick you up
Yeah.
and haul you into the emergency room for,
Mhm.
for some sort of a shot. Or you'll
Yeah.
probably have to get an IV. I'm like, simple exchange for a snack, for a glass of water. But the fear response is, what if I'm hungry? What if I don't feel full? All those types of things,
Mhm.
or what if I,
Yeah.
all those what ifs become. And so the diet, is part of it, the exercise, and even in your job.
Mhm.
Hey, I want you to make this. I'm like, you and I are in a mortgage profession.
Yeah.
Someone says, hey, I want you to go make these connections or these
Mhm.
calls. And all of a sudden there's a million things of like, oh my God.
What is this person going to think?
What are they going to think?
What if they're not there? What am I going to say to the person at the
Yeah.
front desk? How am I going to get in? What if they say no?
What if I leave them a voicemail and then
Right.
I'm in a meeting and then they're calling back and it looks like I'm avoiding
Yeah.
them and like a thousand things. So all of a sudden the fear is this is going to be painful.
Right.
When you're like, well, if I don't do anything, I don't have to deal with the pain. And so I think the inactivity is
Mhm.
associated. And that's where, like, when we go back to talking about the
Yeah.
celebrations,
Yeah.
if you would go do those and you would find a little bit of success,
Mhm.
but our ideal is I go do the work.
Mhm.
I instantly want to look like a supermodel.
Mhm.
I instantly want to feel, some sort of big self gratification on all
Mhm.
these things that I'm doing. And I'm at work, I want to get paid more for doing less. I mean, we just start to compound of our self worth and what we're going to sacrifice to try to get there. And that's where all of us kind of get jammed up. And I don't care how many books we read.
I know.
It still falls. So
It's still
if
the
you're
thing.
listening and you're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, you're speaking
Yeah.
to me, I'm like, trust me, it's like if you're not even like doing any of the self
Yeah.
help or meditation and all these things,
Yeah.
it's like it's just the human play.
Right.
I'm just trying to stay ahead of it.
Yeah. So on this realm, so I am reading Let Them. Have you read the Mel Robbins book yet?
No.
So I was, again, not going to read this book because I thought that these two words would be like very, I don't know, foo-foo. I'm just going to say foo-foo because it's easy to just say let them, but it's really like in your head, you still go down the spiral, right? And I was reading it last night, and let me see if I can find it. Oh, here's exactly what it says. Let me see if I can get to the whole spot where it says it. So she's talking about stop wasting your life on things you can't control, which is like that's also been a theme for me lately is like, what am I letting go of? We'll talk about that in a minute. But so this is what she says. So this is what happens when you say let them. And it allows you to just like have a sense of inner peace. She goes, but what happens instead? You work harder, bend further, and you shrink yourself smaller, and still someone is disappointed. Still someone criticizes. Still you're left feeling like no matter how hard you try, it's never enough. Like, and I feel like that is exactly what the world wants us to feel, right? Like it wants us to feel like, okay, you know what? Jeff and I are in the same line of work. He had a really great month and he got this client and he did this and he did that. And be like, well, I only did this. Oh, I guess I should just stop trying. Right?
Yeah.
Right? That whole comparison mentality. And I think that that's the hard part is that people get stuck in that and it doesn't serve them because you know what? You're called to do something different than I'm called to do. We might be in the same line of work. We might be have the same pursuits. We might both want to grow and to change and to make a difference in the world, which is awesome. I'm not going to do it the same way you're going to do it.
Right. And I was, social media obviously is created this platform for everybody to have a voice. If you want to go out and bitch about politics, just go jump on your Facebook page. Somebody's out there telling them that they're right and you're wrong. Yeah. Don't care what side of the aisle you're on, or even if you're moderate, you're still a moron.
Yeah.
There's a name for somebody out there, regardless of what your view is. But the comparison thing, yeah, it's what is it? The comparison's the killer of
thief of all joy.
The thief of all joy. And so, yeah, the comparison thing starts, and like the let them thing, I think that the one thing that kind of stands out, we identify somebody that we want to be like, and like, okay, that's kind of a model. and they're out.
Or we give it the ideal, but it's really not, right?
Right.
Because that's the ideal for them, but not for us.
Correct. So they're living out this life, but we want it.
Mhm.
And then we're like, well, I don't know how to get it. Well, if you're the reason you know them as intimate as you do, because you're following them on their social media and doing all those things. And I'm like, and if that's what you want, just do what they're doing. It's the biggest copy. It's the playbook of all times. And
Rip off.
it is. And we literally stop short of it and say, well, I can't do that because then I'm like,
well, it's because they did it.
Right.
Right. It's not because we didn't do it.
Right.
And that's the one thing that I'm learning, even like with them. And she said that the biggest piece is you have to follow it up with let me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like it's one thing to say let them, to put your brain in the right mental space to now say, okay, but now what do I need to do?
Right.
Right. And I think that's where most people, me included, fall short. Like 9 times out of 10, I'm like, well, oh my gosh, that is such a great post. That is such a great, like, I'm so glad that they achieved that goal or they helped that many people or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then I forget to say, but what did I do?
Right.
Like we all have the same abilities to pursue, right? Like we don't have the same ability to speak. We don't have the same ability to craft a content message. We don't, or to have a different conversation with a different referral partner, or a relationship, or a family member, whatever it is. But we do have different gifts that we're given so that we can make a difference in the way that we're supposed to.
Right.
Right. And to have conversations that only we're supposed to have. Like you're not supposed to have every conversation on my behalf. Right. I'm not supposed to have every conversation on your behalf. People would think we're very different. Like Jeff tells great stories. I don't. Like I'm just being honest. Like it's one of those things. Like that's not my strength. I love to talk, as we can see. I love to help other people grow. Like years ago when I wrote my obituary, the one thing that drives my success is helping other people succeed.
Wait a second now. You wrote your own obituary?
Yeah.
At what age did you write this?
A long time ago. Okay. So it was probably 15 years ago, and I need to go. But
sorry to make it you off top.
Yeah, no. So I went through a coaching program, and you spend a full day going through essentially what they call as your life plan, and how they have you start is in your obituary. And really what it is it's almost how you want to be remembered. It's kind of where we started, is like, what is that goal? Right. And it's like, how do you achieve things? You have to go with the end in mind. Right. Mm-hmm. And if in the obituary wasn't about accolades, that's the beauty of it, is it wasn't about accolades. It was about truly how you want to be remembered. And so at the end of my obituary that I wrote years ago is a poem of the boy on the beach with after the tide comes in, it's littered with starfish, right? Mm-hmm. And there's that crotchety old man. And if you've heard the poem, everybody knows, like, you can just picture that crotchety old man, like, hey kid, what are you doing? You can't help all of them, right? And the kid goes, he's throwing them back, thousands of them. No, but it makes a difference to this one, right? And I think about that, like, there are so many things that come in and out of our lives, and we never know how we're going to impact somebody. We never know. Similar to like this podcast. We have no idea of you and I just getting together, having a conversation and sharing things we like to have conversations about. We never know what or how it might impact people. Right. And that's not why we don't do it for that. We do it to just share information, right? Yeah. And so I think that if we have a different perspective of why we pursue something or how we want to be remembered, it's super easy to say yes to the right things and no to the things that aren't serving you, right? Like, it gives you permission to say no. Like I hate the word no. Like I was an only. We both have a problem with it. I was an only child, and I work in pursuits of life in business that ideally you want the yes. Like we always want the yes. I have a hard time saying yes. I do too. No, right? Right. Because okay, let's just do that. Yeah, let's try it. A week later, I'm like, that was not very good. What am I doing? But I think that as you start to understand like what it is that drives you, it's easier.
Right.
And you give yourself permission to rest, which is the hardest thing that we do.
Right.
Like we've talked about this before, but we just got a sauna. And I will now make trade-offs or it's okay. Simple exchanges, right? Like you can't go have, like, you're not supposed to go have a drink and then sit in a sauna, right? It's bad for you because your liver's already working overtime. And when you go in a sauna, you're detoxing.
Right.
So you can't do both, right? And so where it used to be like, hey, let's go to a happy hour and I go meet somebody out. I'm like, yeah, let's go. But I'm going to have like soda water and a lime because I intend to sauna tonight.
Right.
Like they are those little things that just move us in the right direction.
That's why golf and softball have worked out so well for so many people. It's like you can drink it in the same thing.
Right, sauna you can't, yeah.
Right, exactly. With sauna you can't. Like,
yeah,
you're absolutely right on that. And so you made a simple exchange of I can have a cocktail, but I want to do a sauna.
Yeah.
And like you made the decision like the sauna is more important than the cocktail. It's both rest.
Yeah.
But which one's truly providing you rest and restoration? It's the sauna.
Yeah. And you know what I love about sitting in the sauna is 9 times out of 10, I would say like it's Aaron, my husband and I, and we turn on some weird music. I'm going to say that like whether like a detox frequency or something like that just kind of calms you, similar to what you hear in a spa, but it's conversation. Right. And these things right here that I have like sitting right in front of me, they deter that conversation.
Right.
And I think we've lost that art of conversation. And so I think it's more than just the sauna. I think it's all of that goes into it. It's the rest. It's my body. I know what it's doing for my body. And I know that it's not like today, but what it'll do for it in the future. Right. Like I think you look up the information, decreased risk of heart disease and things like that runs in my family, Alzheimer's, which runs in my husband's family. But just that the time frame of being in a specific place for a specific amount of time, and there's nothing else that you have to do.
You know, and that's the interesting thing too. It's when people think of rest. Now, don't get me wrong. Everyone's guilty of a doom scroll.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God, 35 minutes just went by. I'm like, I haven't done anything but just sit and watch videos. That's why America's Funniest Videos is still on.
Right.
I'm like, we're entertained by that constant thing. It started years ago. We talk about it today, but I'm like, it literally started a long time ago. It's something new. It's like watching TV that never gets old. And so that all began. But what you just said is like exactly the thing of like the rest and the restoration isn't sitting there and have your mind wandering through and being entertained. It's literally being still, which is what's encouraged inside of Jesus's message. It's just sit and be still. And whether you're doing it in a sauna or you're doing it on a lake place or whatever, but everyone takes the phone out. And when you said that, I'm like, it all came roaring back to me when people said, how can you go out there and go run for 2 hours or whatever? I'm like, no one can touch me at that time.
Yeah.
I can have my phone on, I can have it off, I can have music playing, I can have it off. I could just be out alone, but no one really knows where I'm at and no one can get to me.
Right.
And it gave you permission to go have an hour or an hour and a half by yourself, no interruptions, and no one really knows how to get to you to even interrupt you. And so I think that's important for everybody is to go find your space, put the phone away and just be still.
But don't you think, though, that you also claimed that time for yourself? And so other people respected that for you.
Sure.
Right?
And if they didn't, it didn't matter because they're like, well, I'm not telling you, which is probably a bad idea. I'm not going to tell anybody where I'm running. I'm 9 miles from home and no one knows where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you had a tracker on your phone so somebody could find you.
No, not really. It's like literally getting lost. Like he's laying dead somewhere in a ditch. He got run over by Jed and Homer on their way to go, feed the cows, and just chucked me out the side of the ditch. And I'll be like, there'll be bones left over at the end of the day, but. Like you hit it right on the head, and the rest thing is probably the hardest thing for most people. And they attach it to sitting on the couch and watching TV. Right. And I'm like, And
then they wake up exhausted.
Yeah.
Right.
I watched a show that's full of tragedy, and controversy and arguing, and there's high energy explosion type of stuff. And I'm like, you're elevating your blood pressure watching this stuff. Carrie and I are watching this show called Dark Matter on Apple TV. It's so trippy. And it's like, I can't go to, like, this is not something you'd want to watch before you're going to go to bed.
Yeah. I can't watch any of those shows. I don't think, I feel so bad for my husband because probably 5 years ago, I just didn't watch much TV. And now I pretty much watch sports.
Yeah.
Or I love documentaries.
Me too.
Primarily, I love the National Geographic documentaries. Like, in a lot of it, like, we've watched some rock climbing ones, we've watched some extreme sports and things like that. But it's really, it goes back to where we started. It's the pursuit, right? And it's, their preparation, their training, like all of those things. It's all just a part of it. And regardless whether it's them or us, we're all in the same boat, striving for the same things in a different way, in a different purpose, in a different plan, or whatever it might be.
If no one would be following you around with a camera, if everyone could go free climb a face wall in Yosemite Park
and sleep on, I'm like, I don't even know how I pack. I am not a good packer. I don't even know how I would pack for something like that.
You're too bougie to be hanging out outside.
I'm too bougie to be doing that. But, like, where am I going to go to the bathroom? How am I going to wash my face with my face wash and all the things? Like,
who's ever below you? There should be a sign. Feces falling randomly at any point during but all of that is it's inspiring, it's encouraging. And don't you even find times you watch something that's like super, like an ultra competitive athlete that's doing some extreme thing, and you're like, God, what if I just put my head down and said, I want to do the same thing? Could I accomplish it? And then, about a half hour later, I'm like, I'm not investing that much time. And that isn't going to be my thing. But there is something else in my life that I could invest in that deeply. And a lot of it is it's self motivation for them. There isn't anything good that comes out of it at the end. However, the story itself is what inspires somebody to do something great. So there always is something good to come out of it.
Yeah. And I think it's like, when we say that we're going to go do something, what's the first thing that comes to our mind? Why we can't.
Right.
What's limiting us? Like, that's the first thing that comes to our mind. And it's learning to overcome those limitations that is the hardest and most rewarding. Right. And that's the difference, is I think that in those stories, that's what evolves, is how they overcome it, right? It's not that people can't do it. 9 times out of 10, it's that we won't. Right.
It's a can't or I won't.
Yeah.
And like, in some like, you have to really analyze, like, you know what? I'm going to go on a 50-mile ultra marathon. And it crossed my mind. I was going to go do an Ironman. All those things, come along, and you're like, yes. And then I bought a book. I became an Ironman. And I went, nope. Nope. It broke it down, made it simple, but it starts off with, like, go have a conversation with your family, tell them you're going to do the most selfish thing you'll ever do in your entire life, probably end up in a divorce. Your kids will hate you at the end of this thing because you're going to invest vast amounts of time to do something that does absolutely nothing for the family, and it's all about you. And that's when I stopped and said, I'm going to finish the book, but I'm not going to go sacrifice all those things. And they're basically giving you the warning shot. You can go in there and invest 2 to 4 hours a day, and on the weekends, you're giving it up. You're out on a 12-mile or a 12-hour bike ride, or if you're going to go run a marathon today, and you're going to go do all the stuff. And I'm like, I'm not investing that much time. I don't want that end result bad enough.
But fortunately, you read the book and they told you that.
Right.
Because what would have been the repercussion if you would have said that, right? Like, how would it have impacted your family? How would it have impacted your relationships? And when you said that, what you just told me is that those are more important than that goal.
Yep. It helps you identify your value system a little bit when you're like, what's most important to you? I would rather go, my relationship with my wife and my kids is great. than to walk around with that shirt that's got the I, the I and the M, or the hat, and everyone goes,
Guess what?
"Were you an Iron Man?" "Yes, I am."
You can buy one.
Yeah, I was going to say, probably just get one online.
Yeah.
And I was going to, you're an Iron Man? Absolutely.
Always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've watched so many of those movies. I've watched all the movies. He's great.
I am a superhero. Just ask me.
I am. Yeah, I'm an Iron Man. I've never completed one, but I've watched all the movies, and I feel like I'm a superhero.
Yeah, I love it.
Jen, we're about 45 minutes, so we wrap this one up. And,
yeah, one of the things that we said we'd share is maybe one of our favorite things.
Yeah. We got so many things on our list we didn't talk about. We'll have way more the next time too.
Yeah. What do you think has been a favorite thing that's been hanging out for you lately?
It probably goes even back to the book, The Threshold. We said we're going to talk about it, so this would be a great time to talk about it. It's so, and I recommended this to two other people now that are also in, and when I say a transition, we don't even know what that means. Sometimes we think we might, but this book talks a lot about a transformation, transition, and I'm still trying to identify what it is, but it's amazing how this book, the prophetic nature of it, and the days that I go, hey, I didn't read that yesterday, or I didn't read that for the last 2 days, and then I read it, and it felt like that was exactly what I needed to hear that day. And maybe every single day I needed to hear that message, but that's probably the thing that I told Carrie last night. I go, I feel like somewhere in the last year I was more of a caterpillar. And I feel like I need to go more into the butterfly. And so we're doing a slight tweak with my role. And then also, I'm also understanding that what I'm doing in so many ways is like, I'm not using the gifts, and I'm not fulfilling, I think, what God has played out for me. And so before that door shuts, I need to jump on that opportunity.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that. So the things that I wrote down that we didn't get to are praying bold prayers, where is my lack of faith, and understanding wisdom, which I think that's what I think that the threshold really, like, when I listened to a podcast from somebody else, that gentleman was on it, and I bought the book, and I think I've given out probably 20, like, no joke.
Really?
And the thing about it is that sometimes it's things you don't want to hear, but the beautiful thing in that book is that he uses scripture, and he uses Old Testament scripture. Like, we've all been there. Like, we're not going through anything new. Like, hundreds of thousands of years from the beginning of time, they went through the exact same thing that we went through. And we have to continue to pursue, and we have to work through to get to the other side of that wisdom. So one of the things that for me is probably my one thing right now is I am in love with the Growth Day app with Renee Bouchard. I love the fact that it is one, I love growing. I love learning, but I don't always stop and do, right?
Right.
And so within it is this journal that now if I can't sit and listen and write in the journal at the same time or type in the journal at the same time, I do not do it. Because there is something about like letting it set in and like really letting it sink in.
Right.
One of the gentlemen that I listened to this morning, which I think is funny, is like you and I are both the deep thinkers. And he talked about the importance of deep conversations. And I do think that if we're willing to have, he said, if we're willing to have greater deep conversations, then we're able to connect. We're able to do the things that like ultimately we all desire, but it takes effort, right? And I think that that's super hard for most people. But if we really want the things that we want in life, then 9 times out of 10 we have to go deeper.
Yep. Can and I won't be able to give credit to whoever did it, but there was a quote in that book that really hit me between the eyes and hit me in the heart, and I've shared it with a few people, and they always go, "Wow!" So the quote in the threshold was, "If it's not God's timing, it can't be forced.
Correct.
If it is God's timing, it can't be stopped."
Right.
And like that, there was so much to that that really kind of went back to the Old Testament and those stories. So
Yeah.
well, Jen,
Awesome.
we hopefully we, you know what, we're going to go on YouTube. Maybe we'll have a whole whopping 2 people. You and I will and listen to it. But next month we'll come back together and we'll do another one, and we'll go out and hopefully share this and someone finds some value in it.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.